So we're going to now transition into talking to you about the methods that the C-TLC has used to help schools throughout New England cultivate mindful school communities. And we've used a 5-step process. And the first part is to become aware of the needs of each school or state, and to introduce possible solutions so that the members of the C-TLC themselves become aware of those ideas. The next step that we took was we're using the C-TLC as a type of core learning team. These educators and school leaders are coming together to talk about these really big topics and then disseminate that information back to their schools. The third step is the SCATE assessment, which we'll get into more in depth in the afternoon, but we'll give you a little preview here. And the fourth step is making sure that the training doesn't just happen once, but there is continuous professional development, especially in the areas of neurobiology of trauma, the neuroscience of emotions and executive functioning, and also how children develop healthily throughout the lifespan. Now, we gave you a crash course in that in 30 minutes, but really getting in depth in this takes coming back to it over and over again throughout the years, coming at it from lots of different angles. And we have a lot of free resources on the New England MHTTC website, as well as on the CEI website, but it's really important to make this an intentional practice. And then we'll talk more in the afternoon, but a little bit at the end of today's morning session about how to use the data that you gather through the SCATE and other areas of your school daily life to inform actioning with visioning. So that first step, awareness, in Maine, Martha spoke about the needs assessment that she did to get a layout of the land in general, how mental health for children is being approached in the region in different states. It's also really important to do that for your own school. And we found in New England and throughout the country, a lot of schools are really operating with an all hands on deck approach. They're just trying to put out little fires rather than trying to look at the underlying roots of what's making school so stressful. Fewer students are coming in ready for kindergarten or coming to middle school ready for middle school because perhaps that trauma that we talked about, the executive functioning skills are not there because children are more concerned with staying safe. That's leading to lower achievement. And as we mentioned before, the vicarious trauma and stress of staff. So we're seeing a lot of these shared frustrations, not only in schools, but in outside agencies too, which is why we thought it was so important to bring together community members and educators.
Before we get to step 2, I just want to give you 30 seconds maybe to think about your awareness and jot down a few ideas. So what comes to mind in terms of your circumstance, the trauma, your readiness, the frustrations? So the second step is to establish core learning teams. Keep your list close by. We'll refer to it a couple times today, okay? You know, what's the difference between a team and a core learning team? So you think about teams. In schools, we have these professional learning communities. In organizations, you sometimes have a work group. And I remember when I worked for a nonprofit, we would call it our silo, because sometimes we just worked in our own narrow area. And sometimes in schools, you have the 5th grade silo as well. And there's not much cross-fertilization of ideas. So when we think about a learning team, first we think about a team that's established to learn together, to grow together. And core is at the heart, the center. So what we like to do when we set up our practice in schools is help the schools set up a core team. Now, your core team could be your primary grades and a core learning team for kindergarten through 3rd grade. It could be for the English teachers, the core group, or it could be across grade levels. We like to make sure that if there's counselors, psychologists, school administrators, that you have some representation, although the administrator is kind of interesting. If it's the principal in particular, it's better not to have that person as part of the team per se, but rather somebody who connects with the team And so you get that administrative input, but the person isn't always there on a day-to-day basis, because you want that team to have the ability to do its stuff and not be centering itself all the time. So, and then you have outside agencies who are working together. We really believe it's helpful to have somebody from the outside work with you. And particularly as we all have such a common goal and mission right now. And our mission to reduce or alleviate trauma is definitely related to academic learning, and those things that we've traditionally have thought are this key mission, the central reason for having a school. Because as Dana's been saying over and over again today with the neuroscience, the neurobiology, if in fact a child is undergoing trauma, it's really, really difficult to learn. And so we also know that there's this thing called neuroplasticity, which means if we do things like mindfulness and do things that help kids feel more protected, that in fact their brains open up and learning is easier. So what we have with Core Learning Team are discussions. We begin by talking about our awareness, the things that you just wrote down that you're concerned about. You may think about safety, emotional dysregulation, things that take students away from learning, and also the limits of our traditional way of handling things. Think about going back to school. If you're in a school with plastic shields and masks, and a student becomes disruptive, the old school way of doing things might be to have sent the student to the principal's office to come up with a consequence, stay after school, miss recess, extra homework. It may be that it's more modern and you know something like restorative practices, or you know something about looking a little deeper to see what could be impacting a student. So all that becomes a part of the dialogue you have with the Core Learning Team. Okay, next slide. Our use of the word comes too from Peter Senge's work. And maybe some of you have read his book. He's written about learning organizations, organizations that process knowledge and use that knowledge to continue to evolve. Not just a fixed structure, but an evolving institution. And that's what we're in the midst of right now. It's a vital part of an organization, the being, the essence of an organization. It's core knowledge, it's core learning. Next slide. And then we think about teaming. And I don't know about you, but I can tell you, I've been on some really good teams, and then I've been on some that aren't so good, right? And someone like it's, oh, gee, it's Wednesday afternoon. You know what we've got? We've got another meeting. And there's all these barriers that come up with teaming. So what we have to do is get beyond the barriers. Here are some of them. Lack of trust, vague goals. You know, when are we getting together? They're not giving us any release time for it. Like, what are we supposed to do? And like, so what? Who really cares? Where's this going? So thinking about the barriers, thinking about working with outside teams. Next slide. We're going to have a breakout session. And Dana, how many minutes do we have for this one?
We'll have a 4-minute discussion here.
Okay. So you're going to go in a breakout room and you're going to talk about some of the barriers to effective teaming. Think about particularly teaming with outside agencies, but other teams you're on. What gets in the way? Okay. See you in 4. So most people are back. Let's spend maybe 2 minutes just bringing up a few of the things that have come up in various sessions. So Chris, you were in the room with me. What's 1 or 2 things you heard?
Okay, can you hear me? All right, one of the things that I heard was how important it is for all the team members to feel important, as well as to share what their roles are, because sometimes there's some confusion about who's on the team and what they're responsible for.
Good. And Michelle, I see that you've joined us. Can you speak for your group? Michelle Rivers Murphy. Can someone unmute her? While we're waiting, Martha, what about your group?
Well, our group talked about the challenges in the schedule, trying to fit everything in the day, while also having sometimes like a virtual world gives us more options to meet together in ways that we wouldn't be able to otherwise, but also can affect some other aspects of the work. But trying to fit in seeing students, teaching students, planning for students in abbreviated days or abbreviated schedules of a couple days a week or different cohorts in the learning is really, really challenging. And we talked about how we will all be making plans and then having to scrap them, be flexible, and make a new plan. So Kristen shared a quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower with us. In preparing for battle, I've also always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable.
All right. Wow. Wow.
Quote to, for us to think about the planning process, the talking process, and developing a process for what you're going to do when the plans you've made are not quite working is sometimes more important than the actual substance of the plan, because it's likely that will have to change over time and as things change and as the needs, as you learn more about the needs of your staff and students.
Martha, you are so right. That planning time is critical. Getting to know each other, knowing each other's roles, which is one of the things that came up in our group. And if you're an outside agency, one of the things I heard is sometimes there's a resistance. You know, you don't want that expert coming in to tell you what to do. So how do you bridge that when in fact it's not only roles, but maybe different missions, different views of what needs to happen, and limited time and scheduling? And I just want to call on one more person quickly. So
I just wanted to say that Candace also just sent me the message saying that her dad always says, plan for the best, but prepare for the worst. So
good one. That is a good
for
one.
that wisdom as well. So.
And Julia, are you available? Can you maybe share a little bit about your group? So Dana, was she part of your group?
She is. Are you
Yes,
on?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I couldn't get myself unmuted. We talked about, and it seemed like the big piece was time, trying to center around having time available to be part of a teaming process. And so that was one of the big barriers, as well as just communication was another one that was mentioned. You know, having that, I don't say lack of communication, but I think clear communication and being that aware and understanding of what was expected. And Dana was in there too, so she can chime in with what I might have missed.
Yeah, so the one comment that really stood out to me too came from someone on the call today who's a part of a parent network, and the importance of having that home school connection, and how sometimes the problem not only is miscommunication, but a lack of opening the mind up and thinking outside of your own personal experience to how others might be having experiences. So that comes back to what we talked about earlier, and rethinking those problem behaviors and rethinking the attention seeking to be more about connection seeking, and the behavior problems more as the kids don't have the tools yet to meet your expectations, and we have to give them those tools if we expect them to follow a certain set of behavioral norms.
Good. I just want to give you 2 or 3 takeaways. So one, you know, team building's important, obviously, right? If somebody from the outside agency is coming in, take a little extra time to work together. If someone from an outside agency is part of your core learning team, you already have an advantage over other schools, other environments, because you already have someone with some inside knowledge helping to develop that joint sense of mission, a joint vision, joint leadership. All of those things are really, really critical. And then the third thing, think about kids and how often we have them team, and what are some of the barriers to their teaming. So as you learn about teaming, and as your awareness, in fact, you can add to your awareness by saying, my awareness of teaming is, these are the barriers. Think about it for kids, and how do you help them process? Don't just say, okay, I expect you two to go off and do this and come back and report to me, you know, because they're going to have some barriers too. And then the last thing is, sometimes there's an absolute joy of teaming. You know, if I did everything by myself in front of this screen every day, it would be so awful. So just connecting, even virtually, with a team can be very, very joyous. It can be the best part of my day.
We have step 4 that we are going to talk about. Sorry, step 3 that we're going to talk about. Our SCATE, our School Compassionate Culture Analytical Tool for Educators, which helps guide teachers in exactly which areas of school culture they most need to improve. So it gives you which strengths you can leverage to enhance the feeling of community, and also gives you an idea of which areas might need a little more support. And when schools take the SCATE, they get a report out that gives them ideas for curricula and policy change and activities that individual teachers can do in their schools as well. And we're going to talk a lot more about this in the afternoon, so I'm not going to go too in depth right now, but just to let you know that any school in New England is able to take the SCATE and receive a report for free. And when you do that, you also get to become a Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative member, which allows you access to our resources and our grants. I'll turn it over to Chris for step 4.
Okay, so if we think about this process, and this is what we've done as we've implemented our heart-centered learning, our model for compassionate schools. And we think about all the needs in the 4 quadrants, right? Related to prevention, building resiliency, protective factors, supporting kids. Then we think about not only what is needed, but what professional development is needed. Okay, and it's huge. It is huge to think about what do you do to get people prepared in a way so their comfort level increases, their sense of confidence increases, their sense of community increases, and their sense of compassion increases. You know, we feel like we're working together as a team with others as we learn together. So this learning together in professional development is a real important part of that. And with Kristen and Jamie, we have 2 fellows from Maine who, in fact, have worked with a broader network of fellows. And so they learned something about compassion and leadership with compassion and what to do by networking, sharing how to overcome barriers, sharing the joys, the excitement. And that sense of excitement is part of what we love about our project, and what part of what we know will lead to sustainability. So we want to help you get to this spot so that even if the leadership changes, you still have this sense of community, this sense of belonging, this sense that you can be effective because you are all part of this wonderful world. You're all part of this solution. And here I just spoke about the model. So there it is again. See, it's kind of a thread, and it goes through the things we write, the things we talk about. And it's almost like, you know, Dana or Martha, you may laugh at this, but I get up in the morning and I'll think, which one am I focusing on today? You know, where's my joy going to be? And these are almost my joy centers.